Imagine a man sitting in a quiet study in Constantinople somewhere around the year 55. He has paper, he has ink, he has time, and he has a single mission. He is going to destroy the reputation of the most powerful woman in the empire, and he is going to do it after she is already dead. His name was Procopius of Caesarea. He had served at the highest levels of the imperial court for over 2 decades. He had been private secretary to the empire's greatest general. He knew the throne room. He knew the bedchambers. He knew every rumor. And he wrote a book so vicious, so detailed, so saturated with sexual humiliation, that it would shape every single thing the world remembered about Empress Theodora for the next 1400 years. Theodora was born around the year 497 in Constantinople, the daughter of a bear-keeper at the Hippodrome. By age 12, she was performing on stage. By her early 20s, she had become the mistress of a provincial governor and then been abandoned in Alexandria. By 28, she was the wife of a future emperor. By 30, she was sitting beside Justinian as Empress of the Roman world. And by her early 30s, in January of 532, she would speak the words that saved his throne and sealed her place in history. She built convents. She rewrote marriage law. She protected refugees inside her own palace. She corresponded directly with foreign queens. Officials of the empire swore their oaths of loyalty to her name as well as to her husband's. And yet almost everything you have ever read about Theodora was first written by the one man who decided in private that she had to be erased. This is not a story about a prostitute who became an empress. That is the version Procopius wanted you to remember. The bear-keeper's daughter, the stage performer, the woman who slept her way to the purple. That story has been recycled by chroniclers, dramatists, and historians for 14 centuries, and it is exactly the legacy he engineered. What you are about to hear is the full anatomy of a historical assassination. How a court insider weaponized literature against a woman he could not defeat in life. How a single hostile manuscript shaped every modern image of her, from medieval chronicles to 21st century novels. How modern scholarship is finally dismantling that propaganda sentence by sentence. And how the actual Theodora, the legislator, the co-sovereign, the protector of the persecuted, was almost completely buried under one man's 200-page act of revenge. Before we walk into the study where Procopius sharpened his pen, drop a comment with your city and country. Hit subscribe and join Velours Spectre. You are watching Velours Spectre, the best dark history channel on the planet. The Empire Theodora was born in Turan on a single principle. Status was inherited, not earned. A bear-keeper's daughter belonged to the bear-keeper's caste. A senator's daughter belonged to the senator's caste. The Roman legal system, inherited and refined for half a millennium, treated this boundary as a fact of nature. Constantinople in the early 6th century was a city of approximately 500,000 people, the largest in the Mediterranean world. The Hippodrome at its center could seat 100,000 spectators, almost a quarter of the population at a single event. It was not a stadium. It was an industrial-scale machine for managing political pressure, a quota system for public anger, calibrated and deployed by every emperor for 2 centuries. 4 chariot teams competed there, blues, greens, reds, and whites. By Theodora's lifetime, only the blues and greens carried any political weight. The factions functioned as something between modern political parties and street gangs. They controlled neighborhoods. They controlled patronage. They controlled the mob. Beneath the racing world ran a second economy. Female performers, acrobats, dancers, comic actresses were classified by Roman law as infames, persons of infamy. They could not testify in most legal proceedings. They could not inherit certain forms of property. They could not, under any condition, marry a man of senatorial rank. The law was explicit and immovable. According to David Potter's 2015 biography for Oxford, this was the world Theodora was processed through from the age of 12. Not chosen, processed. The system absorbed her as raw material and prepared her for a single destiny: short career, public ridicule, eventual disposal. The infrastructure was built to extract and discard women like her. It was a system designed to make her invisible. and it was about to be broken by the woman it was designed to crush. Theodora was small. Even her hostile biographer admitted it. The mosaics that survive at the Church of San Vitale in Ravenna show a woman with sharp dark eyes, a long nose, a slight frame draped in fabric so densely embroidered it looks like armor. She was, by every contemporary account, remarkably beautiful. She was also remarkably intelligent, and that more than the beauty is what unsettled the men who would later try to define. She had a daughter from her time before Justinian, born somewhere in the years she spent away from the capital. The girl's name is lost. So is the father's. So is most of the truth about those wilderness years between Alexandria and Constantinople. We have only the version Procopius wanted us to have. What we can verify is this. Theodora returned to Constantinople around the year 522, having converted to Miaphysite Christianity in Alexandria. She set up modestly as a wool spinner, and she was introduced to Justinian, the emperor's nephew and heir presumptive, who was 40 years old and unmarried. She did not seduce him. She intellectually destroyed him. Within months he was rearranging Roman law to marry her. In 524, the existing Emperor Justin issued a new edict. Patricians could now marry former actresses provided the woman had demonstrated repentance. The text is preserved in the Codex Justinianus. It is in effect a personalized law. Justinian married Theodora in 525. 2 years later they ruled an empire of 30 million people. She had walked into the imperial palace from outside every door that should have been locked. Procopius of Caesarea was already a young man of letters when Theodora arrived at the palace. He was educated, well-connected. By the year 5027, when Justinian became sole emperor, Procopius had been appointed private secretary and legal advisor to the rising star of the Byzantine military, the general Belisarius. It was the best seat in the empire for watching how power actually worked. For the next 2 decades, Procopius traveled with Belisarius across 3 continents: North Africa, Italy, Persia. He saw the reconquest of the Western Roman territories from the front row. He saw imperial policy formed and revised. He saw Theodora at close range, and he wrote. Officially, he wrote the wars, 8 volumes of competent, controlled, occasionally beautiful military history. It is still readable today. It made him the foremost Byzantine historian of his generation. He also wrote a panegyric called On Buildings, a glowing account of Justinian's construction program across the empire, including the rebuilt Hagia Sophia. It is the kind of book courtiers write when they want to remain courtiers. But somewhere in the late 5040s, most scholars now place it around 5550. Shortly after Theodora's death, he wrote a 3rd book. He did not publish it. He could not publish it. He hid it. He called it the Anecdota, the unpublished things. We know it today as the Secret History. In its pages, the same Theodora who had built convents and rewritten marriage law became something else, a demon in human form, a sexual maniac, a monster engaged in nightly conspiracy with her husband to depopulate the empire. The contradictions were not subtle. They were total. The official historian had become the secret defamer. The question is why? And the answer, finally, after 14 centuries, is starting to come into focus. Picture this scene. Constantinople, January 18, 532. The walls of the great palace are shaking. Outside, somewhere between 30 and 50,000 armed citizens are demanding the throne. They have a rival emperor already named, a senator called Hypatius, and they have been burning the city for 5 days. Half of Constantinople is on fire. The original Hagia Sophia is rubble. Inside the throne room, the council is unanimous. Justinian must flee. Ships are loaded at the harbor of Bucolion. Treasure is being transferred. Belisarius and Mundus, the 2 best generals in the empire, are present but undecided. Justinian himself is preparing to leave. And then Theodora stands. What she said next is preserved in Procopius's own official history, the wars, not the secret history. Even the man who would later spend years dismantling her reputation could not bring himself to delete this speech. According to Procopius, she addressed the council directly. She acknowledged that custom forbade a woman from speaking in such a meeting. Then she spoke anyway. She told them flight was easy. She told them money was waiting and ships were ready. She told them that if Justinian wanted to live, no one was stopping him. And then she said the line that Byzantine scholars have argued over for 1500 years. Royalty is a fine burial shroud. The room did not move. Justinian did not flee. Belisarius and Mundus drew up their plans within the hour. By that afternoon, soldiers entered the hippodrome through separate gates and trapped approximately 30,000 armed civilians inside. The massacre lasted until evening. Hypatius was executed the following morning. The senatorial conspirators had their estates confiscated. The empire had been saved, not by a general, not by an emperor, by a former actress speaking out of order in a council of men. Procopius was almost certainly in the palace that day. He would have heard her, and in his official history, written under imperial patronage, he gave her full credit. 20 years later, in private, in the secret history, he would describe the same woman as the architect of universal evil. A single witness. 2 stories. One of them was a lie. After Nika, Theodora ruled. There is no other word for it. She did not advise. She did not influence from the shadows. She held her own court inside the Hormisdas Palace adjacent to the Great Palace. She maintained her own staff of patricioi. She received foreign ambassadors. She corresponded directly with the queens of the Gothic kingdoms, with the Persian court, with the Miaphysite patriarchs of Alexandria and Antioch. In her name, Justinian's legal code was rewritten in ways no Roman Empire had seen. According to scholarship documented in the Codex Justinianus itself, the laws passed in this period banned forced prostitution outright. Brothel keepers were expelled from Constantinople and the major imperial cities. Women gained the right to retain their dowries in divorce. Mothers gained guardianship rights over their children. Rape was made punishable by death, and the rapist's property was transferred to the victim, a legal innovation without precedent in Roman history. Across the Dardanelles, on the Asian shore, Theodora founded a convent called the Metanoia, repentance. It functioned as a sanctuary for women extracted from the imperial sex trade. 500 former prostitutes, according to one contemporary account, were housed there at imperial expense. She paid for it. They obeyed. This was not the work of a manipulator. This was the operational signature of a co-sovereign with her own legislative agenda. And Procopius watched all of it. Procopius recorded most of it. Procopius would, in his secret history, claim that every single law she sponsored was driven by personal greed, perversion, or paranoia. The contradiction between the documented legal record and his private account is, on its face, absurd. In 542, the contradiction became unbearable. The plague of Justinian, the first recorded outbreak of bubonic plague in Mediterranean history. According to Procopius's own wars, the death toll inside the capital ran into the tens of thousands per week at its peak. Carts moved through the streets collecting corpses. The harbor became a dumping ground. The infrastructure of imperial governance was collapsing in real time. Justinian himself contracted the disease. For weeks he lay near death. Theodora ruled the empire alone. She held the borders. She maintained the food supply. She kept the army paid. She managed the political factions that would, under any other regent, have torn the throne apart. Belisarius, fighting in Italy, allegedly criticized her authority during this period. Theodora summoned him home, stripped him of his eastern command, and humiliated his wife Antonina's lover in a public theatrical reveal worthy of any stage performance she had ever given. She did not lose the empire while her husband lay dying. And Procopius, watching all of this, was building a private archive of every grievance, every rumor, every story whispered in taverns by men who hated her for not knowing her place. By the mid-5040s, Theodora had been empress for nearly 20 years. The reconquest of the West was bogged down. The plague had hollowed out the population. The treasury was strained. But the regime held, the marriage held. The legislative machine kept producing reforms. Inside the Hormisdas palace, she ran an operation that her husband, the official defender of Chalcedonian orthodoxy, was not supposed to know existed. 300 Miaphysite monks, exiled by imperial decree, had been quietly relocated to her residence. Bishops persecuted for their theology lived in her apartments under armed protection. Theodosius, the deposed Miaphysite Pope of Alexandria, was sheltered there for years. According to John of Ephesus, who knew the situation from the inside, Theodora ran what was effectively a parallel Miaphysite church inside the imperial palace itself, a hidden infrastructure of dissent, maintained by the empress against the official policy of her own emperor. It was, in modern terms, an underground railroad for heretics. Inside the throne room. Stand inside that room with her for a moment. Imagine the calibration of risk. Every refugee she protected was a defiance of canonical law. Every letter she sent to the Miaphysite patriarchs of the East was an act of theological treason against the orthodoxy her husband was sworn to defend. And yet she did it for 15 years, and Justinian, knowing exactly what she was doing, let her do it. This is not the behavior of a husband manipulated by a wicked wife. This is the behavior of two sovereigns who had agreed privately to run a divided empire. Then, in late 547 or early 548, Theodora fell ill. The chronicler Victor of Tonuna recorded the cause in Latin as ex cancere, from cancer. Modern medical historians have suggested breast cancer, though the original Latin term covered a broader range of malignant ulcerations. She was approximately 50 years old. The end was slow. Court physicians did what court physicians did in the 6th century, which was very little. The Miaphysite refugees she had sheltered for 15 years remained in the palace praying. Justinian, the most powerful man in the Mediterranean world, was watching his wife die and could do nothing. On June 28, 548, Theodora stopped breathing. Justinian was present. According to surviving accounts, he wept openly in front of his entire court, a breach of imperial dignity that would have been unthinkable for any previous Roman emperor. He buried her in the Church of the Holy Apostles, the great mausoleum he had built for the dynasty. He never remarried. He ruled for 17 more years, alone. And in those 17 years, almost no significant legislation was passed. The historian Procopius outlived her by a decade or more. Somewhere in those years, alone in his study with all his accumulated grievances, he sat down and finished the secret history. He wrote her death scene last. He wrote her into a demon. He wrote her into a sexual grotesque. He wrote her into a monster who had haunted the empire with her husband, working secretly to depopulate the human race. It was the last thing he wrote about her. He could not publish it. He hid the manuscript and died. The secret history was lost for almost 1,000 years. It surfaced in the Vatican Library in the year 1623, was published in Lyon, and triggered an immediate scandal across early modern Europe. Edward Gibbon, writing his Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire in the 1770s, treated Procopius's accusations as substantially true. So did every major historian for the next 2 centuries. Charles Deal, writing in Paris in 1904, was among the first to push back. Then came Averell Cameron at Oxford in 1985, then James Allen Evans at Routledge in 2005, then David Potter at Oxford in 2015, and most recently Sergei Grau in 2023, publishing in Greek, Roman, and Byzantine studies. The scholarly consensus has now reversed completely. Procopius's secret history is read today as deliberate invective, a literary weapon dressed as a memoir, full of inverted patterns drawn from the lives of saints, designed to make Theodora the photographic negative of every holy woman in the Byzantine tradition. The propaganda is still winning in popular culture. The scholarship is finally catching up. The French philosopher Michel Foucault, writing in the 20th century, argued that power and knowledge are inseparable. Whoever controls the archive controls the past. Whoever writes the history writes the legacy. He called it the regime of truth, the quiet machinery by which one version of reality is preserved and all others are destroyed. The lesson is not new. The Greeks knew it. The Romans knew it. Tacitus, writing under emperors he despised, knew that the historian's pen was a weapon more durable than any sword. Procopius knew it too. He understood that he could not defeat Theodora while she lived. So he waited. He gathered his rumors. He sharpened his Greek, and he wrote her into a shape she had never been. Today, tourists move through the church of San Vitale in Ravenna and stand beneath her mosaic. They photograph her face. They walk past unaware that they are looking at the most contested woman in Byzantine history. The wall remembers her one way. The secret history remembers her another. Only the historians can tell the difference. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If this story changed how you see one of history's most defamed women, subscribe, hit the like button, and share with someone who needs to see the truth behind the propaganda. You have just watched another premium documentary from Velours Spectre. Click the video appearing on your screen right now. The descent into the past continues.